Greetings everyone, Jera here from Antioch Baptist Church, Rochester, Indiana, where I'm a youth leader, not a youth pastor. I'm a teacher, not a preacher. There's a difference, and if you don't know the difference, then it's not important. But if it is important to you, that's why I say it. I teach middle school students, grades 6 through 8 and ages 11 through 14. And today's lesson is going to be called Peace, Be Still. Now you can think of this lesson as a triangle because there are 3 points to this lesson and each point is connected to one another like a triangle. But each point leads to the other. The first point leads to the second, which leads to the third, which leads back to the first. So you can think of this triangle as inside a circle. It's a circle of points. The first point of our lesson comes from Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, starting in verse 37. There arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part, this Jesus, he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? So, Jesus, he had just got done preaching to a whole lot of people, like for a long time. And he was tired. Not only was he God, but he was God in human flesh. So he got tired just like the rest of us do. And he'd been preaching, doing all kinds of miracles, healing people, feeding thousands of people with a couple of fishies and a few loaves of bread. His disciples, they've been with him all this time. They've seen him do this. They've never seen anybody control the weather before. Now, that's something. Even nature obeys God. A little background here. 4 of his disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, were professional fishermen. Their fathers were fishermen. That was their trade. That was their bread and butter, their life. And they're not afraid of no little storm. These are professional fishermen. Professional fishermen, when a big storm hits, if it's bad enough that they're afraid of it, then it's a really bad storm. They were afraid. They were panicked. The winds are beating on this ship. The waves are just coming over the ship, beating on the ship, filling the ship with water. And Jesus, he ain't afraid. He's just sleeping there in the boat. And they're afraid of this storm. They're so distracted by this storm, they didn't realize who was in the boat with them. They're panicked. And when people panic, they need to blame someone. One of them said to him, Master, carest not that we perish? Don't you care we're about to die? Of course Jesus cares. Of course Jesus cares. But they were panicked and they needed to blame somebody. Hey, it's your fault. Jesus wakes up and he says, Peace, be still. The wind ceased and there was a great calm. And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, What manner of man is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? They've never seen anyone control the weather before. This is just unbelievable. So they were a little afraid of him now. He could have just as easily turned to them and said, Hey, hold your peace, be still, I got this. But he didn't. He just stood up, calmed the storm, and said, What? Where's your faith? I got this. Don't you know who's in the boat with you? Well, that brings us to our next point. Our first point was peace, be still. Our second point is be still and know that I am God. And this comes to us from Psalm chapter 46. We're going to start in verse 8. It says, Come, behold the works of the Lord, what desolations he hath made in the earth. He maketh wars to cease, means he stops wars, unto the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow, and cutteth the spear in sunder. He burneth the chariot with fire. Be still, and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. A refuge is a safety place. He's our safe house. Back then they didn't have guns and tanks. They had bows and arrows and chariots. These people worship other gods and like sacrifice their children to these other gods, and they do a lot of wicked things, and they hate the God of the Jews, and they're going to war. But God's like, hey, I got this, okay? God stopped the battle before it even begun. God broke their bowstrings so they weren't able to shoot arrows. He cut their spears in half so they weren't able to use them. He burned the chariot so the chariots couldn't get, to the people they're fighting against. God stopped the war for them. Be still. Know that I am God. Know who's in the boat with you, okay? Know who's in control of the situation. There's a similar story. Go back about 500 years before that. We got Moses. You know the story about Moses. Goes to Pharaoh, let my people go. All the Hebrew people are slaves in Egypt. And Pharaoh's like, no, I don't know your God, and I'm not going to let your people go. So God plagues them. Finally, Pharaoh, he kicks them out of Egypt, and then regrets his decision, and then decides he's going to go kill the Hebrew people after he kicked them out of Egypt. Moses had led these people away from Egypt in a hurry because now Pharaoh's people is after them. They had to stop at the Red Sea because in front of them's a sea. There's nothing but mountains next to them. They're like in this little passage. And the Egyptians are coming after them. There's nowhere to go. And the people start to panic. And as they're panicking, they're blaming Moses for it. They said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did say to thee in Egypt? Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. They're blaming Moses. We were better off as slaves, and then you come along. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. God's going to stop the battle before it even gets to them, okay? He's going to take care of this problem. God was in the boat with them. That leads us to our last point, and that is the peace of God is our last point. And this comes to us in Philippians chapter 4. We're going to start in verse 4. It says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say, rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Paul is talking to the Philippians here, the Philippian church, and he's saying, rejoice always. Now, it's kind of hard to rejoice when there's a storm going around you. Or there's, some people going to battle with you. Or in our situation, COVID-19 breaks out and the whole world just shuts down. Rejoice. It's kind of hard to do that. But he says, let your moderation be known unto men. I'm going to come back to that point. It says, be careful for nothing. That doesn't mean don't ever be careful. That word careful means anxious. Don't panic. Don't be anxious about anything. Because when you panic, you don't think clearly and you start blaming people. In everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known unto God. Prayer, of course, is how you speak to God, and supplication means almost the same as request. Supplication is your provision, what God provides for you. Say, Lord, I need this. And it says with thanksgiving. Be thankful for, if you ain't got what you need, use what you have. Be thankful for what you have. Let your request be known unto God. You don't have to like what's happening around you, but be thankful. Okay? And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Okay? We won't worship the God of fear. We worship the God of peace. And now, finally, my brethren, continuing in verse 8, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, I'm skipping over the verse here. Whatsoever things are lovely, good report, if there be any virtue, any praise, think on these things. These things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. Okay? Paul's writing this letter here to the Philippians, and Paul practiced what he preached, okay? He's saying, all these things you've heard, you've learned from me. I've taught you. You've seen me do them. You've heard me preach this. You've seen me walk the walk and talk the talk. Do these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now that goes back to verse 5 when he said, let your moderation be known unto men. He's saying, all these things you've seen me do, you do. And let the other people, let other men see you do this, you know. When there's a storm all around you, when people are going to battle, when COVID-19 breaks out and the whole state shuts down, let people see that you're at peace over this because you know who's in control. Don't panic. Don't be blaming people. Let people see that you're not panicking and that you're not blaming people. Don't let people see you panic. Don't let people see you blaming other people. And the best way to not let people see you do that is to not do that. The peace of God, it passes all understanding. Yeah, there's reason to be panicked right now. This COVID thing is worldwide. It has affected everybody in one way or another. You know, some people are without work right now, and some people are working harder right now. Because of this, they have to work harder, especially like, doctors and nurses and stuff. And not just them, there's others too. And there's other people that their work has been reduced. They're not completely out of work, but their workload has been reduced because, companies cutting hours, the whole social distancing thing. There's people getting sick. Some people are worried, if, they have this idea that, if I get sick, I'm going to die. It's easy to get worried about these things, but don't forget who's in the boat with you. Don't forget peace. Be still. Find your happy place, so to speak, okay? Take a deep breath. Remember who's in the boat with you, okay? Once you do that, be still and know that He is God. Once you realize who's in the boat with you, remember He's the one in control. And once you realize He's the one in control, you'll have peace beyond all understanding. And act on that. Don't act panicky. Don't be, don't blame people. Let people see that you're not panicking and you're not afraid because you know who's in control. All those points lead to one another. So that is your lesson for today. And hopefully this COVID pandemic is not going to last forever. I'm sure it won't. But I guess I'll just talk to you again next week.